Well, hello, folks. I'm L.A. Little, and this is your daily NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets. We do it from a neoclassical perspective each time, asking ourselves what happened today. What does it tell us about the coming ones? I do this show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday. It's broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube and under the channel L.A. Little. Check it out there. Subscribe. Reach up there, hit the button. Anytime I push content, you'll be notified. As far as what did happen today, on the face of it, it doesn't look too good, right? You had down days mostly, a little bit at the update here on the Nikkei today, but last night down, broke swing point lows. The CACs, the DAX, if you go through the list, let me pull up the DAX, they were down. So Europe down, Hong Kong was down big. The U.S. couldn't hold its gains, ended up losing by the end of the day. Just a barely squeak out there by the S&P 500. The Russell set new lows. All in all, if you look at it just from a perspective of price, it looks pretty bad. But we don't look at just price. What we look at neoclassically is what happened today, what does it tell us? And each day, it sometimes, not all the time, but most of the time tells you some sort of a story. For example, if we're looking at the S&P 500 tonight, the story here is that this thing tried to set new lows, right, and couldn't do it. In other words, sellers were unwilling to sell at lower prices. You've had a big push down straight away, right? Big, strong push to the lows. In other words, we went from 2017 and we're trading down in the 1890 area, right? So, what is that, 120 points? That's a good percentage, and it's all straight away. You go under it, you go back over it, you don't have more volume, right? You're coming into these lows where there's a lot more volume. You're not pushing that kind of volume. This thing still wants to turn around and go to the top side, and finally, you've got a situation that's telling you it's probably going to try to do it. So that's the S&P 500. Now, the S&P 500 is one piece of the puzzle. We have to look at the others. And if we look at the others, in this case the NASDAQ, right? NASDAQ gets under, stays under, doesn't get back over, right? Even though it had less volume, gets under, stays under. That's not the same setup. But wait. We also have NASDAQ coming into these price zones, presses into them. We look at the numbers on those. We get a low here at 45.06. We get a low in the bar next to it at 45.30. We trade down to 44.87, close at 45.15. So we close in the support zone, under, back over this big bar, less volume comparatively. Again, even though we get a down day, NASDAQ also saying the same sort of story, and that is that, hey, I don't see buyers. I don't see new sellers wanting to sell at these lower and lower prices. NDX. If we look at the NDX, same sort of story. It doesn't even get to the lows, doesn't have the volume. It does go under, stay under, less volume. Now the Russell, different story. Russell gets under yesterday, extends today. If I'm looking for something negative, this is the one that's negative. This is not a good situation. What you want to see, and you want to see immediately, and I'm talking about probably tomorrow, is you want to see this come back in and start hacking away at this retest, regenerate zone on the bearish break of this swing point low here. You want to see this thing come right back up in here and start testing it right away. If you don't, then maybe the Russell is the one to believe. I don't know if it's true yet. What I see elsewhere suggests that this is kind of an aberration, maybe. What I would say from this, irregardless of what comes next, or irrespective, maybe is the proper word, is that the Russell is telling us that longer term, these markets do want to try to trade lower. But I think in the intermediate, or not so much intermediate, but the immediate term, they're probably going to try to trade higher. If I look at the world markets, there I see more evidence of that thought. Let me show you what I'm talking about there. Let me pop over here. I'm going to go into the DAX to start with. So we go to Europe. Again, remember these traded lower. But what they did is they tested. You got a test of this swing point low with a huge volume, right? You test it finally. You tried last week, you couldn't get to it. This week you get under it, back over it. You have no volume. Again, nobody willing to sell at lower and lower prices. That tells me this thing's going to flip around and try to go back the other way. If I look at the CACs over in France, that one also tested under this bar, back over it, also wants to bounce. And finally, if I go over and take a look, sorry about that, if I go over and take a look at some of these others, for example, if I look at just say a resource country, all ordinaries, pushing volume, but what's it doing coming into this high volume low? Doesn't have the volume. That's probably going to hold. If I look at Hong Kong, which actually got under the lows, it gets under them, back over them, has more volume, so probably going to test again, but we're not talking about a huge increase in volume. So even though we're getting some of these breakdowns, or almost breakdowns, like in the case of all ordinaries, the volumes aren't there, and it suggests that they're probably on a world stage, probably going to try to turn this around. But I don't want to stop there with the analysis. I want to go back and I want to pull up the major sectors in the S&P. And if I pull those up and start looking at them, and I'm going to start with the transports. Transports get under, back over. That wants to flip around and bounce. The SOX, under, back over, less volume, wants to flip around. Basic materials, under, back over, a little more volume, telling us this is still weak, but it's going to try to come in and do a retest regen. Energy actually gets under, stays under, so that one's not a positive, although it did start testing into those big volume lows and doesn't have the volume. XLF, under, back over, less volume. Now, technology, as we saw with the NASDAQ NDX, got under, stayed under. That one is coming into a swing point low. 38.75 there. You got into it 38.45. You close at 73. So you're under the bar. You're going to, reconfirm the trend. But again, if you go back to the big bars down here at 38.12, you're going to have to really pick up some volume if you want to break all this out. Continue on. Consumer durables still holding. Gets under, back over, a little bit less volume. XLV, IBB, these were kind of a black eye. They were inside days, less volume. If you look at the IBB shot right up. I actually did a video this morning on the front page of TA Today if you want to check it out. I said, what you want to look for is you want to look for a bounce. You want to see it come right into this little congruent area, the overlap. Got within less than $1 of that, flipped it back around, they sold it. I suspect tomorrow you'll probably test the lows again, but more than likely they're going to hold, but we'll see how that plays out. So that's, if you're looking for weakness, it's still there, and that could be an issue. The other one is Apple. Apple sold off today, and that was, between IBB and Apple, that was the weakness in the NDX. And finally, another sector that did not perform well today is the consumer discretionary. You see it get under, stay under. It again, like the others, is coming into the big bars though. So, it's going to take a lot more volume probably to blow this out. But again, it's a negative for today. So overall, if I look at the world markets, Germany, France, they want to bounce. We've got some hints of bounces probably in Asia. I didn't look at the Nikkei. That one looks pretty bad. That has to do with currency. If we look at U.S. markets, S&P saying we're going to try to bounce. NDX, NASDAQ coming into some areas that also look like it's going to try to bounce. Russell, totally different story. Russell hasn't found a low yet, or at least hasn't shown that it's found a low yet. Sector-wise, still mixed there. You got a couple of them still mixed. Actually, energy, XLB, XLY, and XLV. So you got 4 out of the 9 or 10. The rest of them under, back over. So mixed picture, down 9 days. This market's still going to try to bounce. you've got enough signs here tonight to suggest it's going to do it tomorrow, or at least get started on it tomorrow. Whether it holds or not, I suspect it has a lot to do with how Europe trades tonight, just as it was last night. My suspicion is it would try to bounce today. It did try. It gave it up, other than the S&P and the Dow. But you can see the turn trying to come, trying to focus on a turn here. I suspect you're going to see a bounce start to take place as early as tomorrow. Folks, tell a friend, tell two. I'm LA. This is and it was your daily NeoTA wrap. Have a great one, and I'll see you next time. Good night.